Welcome back for another topical video.
Moral grandstanding.
Right up front here, I'm going to say help me grow the channel, like and subscribe. The link to the locker room is below it. Buy me a coffee. In the locker room, we have the freedom to discuss whatever we want. Help us to build a group of switched on guys. Iron will sharpen iron, and we'll help each other out through our relationships. I've been getting some feedback, and I thought it'd be high time to clear some things up.
You shouldn't resort to manipulation just because she manipulates you. You need to be the better person.
If you believe in equality, Carl, why is it that she gets to choose and he always has to perform? And let me ask you something else, Cubicle Carl. Imagine you've got a man sitting across from you and he needs your help. He feels trapped. His wife was wonderful when they first met. She was spontaneous, sexually generous, creative and collaborative, proactively meets his needs. She seems to genuinely care about him. After the first kid comes along, something changes. He goes to work and puts in a solid 10-hour day at a physically demanding job. He comes home to a wife in a muumuu who shoves a child in his arms and then plops on the couch and immediately starts fingering her phone. He asks, "What's for dinner?" She replies,
Nuka TV dinner. I'm exhausted.
He looks around and wonders to himself, from what? He doesn't remember the last time that they were intimate. Come to think of it, she's never asked him once in his marriage if he was even happy. He's asked her plenty of times, and she always assures him that she is. He asks about her desires for the future and for the kids. She always replies that everything is fine the way that it is. He's tempted, tested, burned out. He wants his wife to be an oasis where they can escape the drudgery of the world and finally feel something besides burden. He's given up talking about it. That only leads to her minimizing his experience of the relationship. Just another argument, and he realizes more and more that he's married and brutally alone. He tries all the talking points, pulls out all the books, For Men Only, Proper Care and Feeding of Marriage, Love and Respect, sheet music, on and on and on. He thinks, oh, maybe it's just her love language. Turns out she's got all of them except physical touch. So he comes home from a hard day of work, rolls up his sleeves, and gets to work at home. Starts cooking nutritious meals for the kids, cleans up the dishes after everyone eats, comes up with bedtime routines for the kids after he gives them a bath, throws a load in the laundry, and mind you, she's a stay-at-home mom. He lights himself on fire to keep everybody around him warm. None of it works. It just makes her more demanding. You'd think at least she'd be thankful for the extra help, but instead she always seems to find something wrong with the way he does things, or the timing, and constantly nags him. Now tell me, Carl, what would you tell this man? Would you tell him that he just needs to communicate more? He needs to step up even more? He needs to serve papers and just nuke the family? Unfortunately, this is a dynamic that a lot of men are experiencing today, and that's why I'm here. I'm Iron Hans. I've been on Red Pill Hard Mode for almost 20 years, unapologetically here to help men, giving practical advice to bring positive change in men's lives, helping men to remember who they are, and to know that you have worth outside of your utility. He is the table. You see, a major problem is a lot of people assume the best in those around them. One look at how 2020 played out is enough to dispel that notion. It doesn't matter how Christian you are, how much you donate to the Sad Puppy Foundation, how many virtue posts you put on Facebook. People are self-interested by nature. Just because you're in a relationship doesn't nullify that. Society's not going to give you a voice. It's not in their best interest to do so because they profit from your labor.
Moral grandstanding.
To the point, welcome back, mahoganists. Hold on a minute, Becky. Hear me out. The definition of mahogany. Mahogany is the hatred of, contempt for, or prejudice against women and girls. Often manifest in behaviors like discrimination, harassment, or violence. I could see how that's a bad thing for sure. I definitely don't have hate or contempt or prejudice against all girls. That seems logical. Let's take a look at prejudice. Prejudice is an unfavorable opinion or feeling formed beforehand, or without knowledge, thought, or reason, often directed towards a group of members and can manifest as discrimination or other harmful behaviors. A lot of what we talk about on this channel was thought about quite a bit, and I'm sure a lot of you dudes have a lot of logical reasons for your mental models and how you feel about particular girls. They do a really good job of advertising their opinions, like a poison dart frog. But here's where they poop the bed in the definition of the term. Mahogany is a form of exism, say, that can perpetuate unequal social roles and power dynamics. So right there, they've moved the goalpost. If you don't believe in blank slate equalism, you too are a monogamist, Becky. If you don't pay for half the date,
Monogamist.
if you would like your man to lead the date.
Monogamist.
Mahogany is often linked to patriarchal systems and structures where men hold more power and privilege. We've gone over this before, but if you expect men to have responsibility with no authority, that's slavery. And somehow they've magically found a way to turn responsibility into privilege. Back to the topic. For whatever reason, people have an aversion to some of the prescriptive advice of the red pill. I find it absolute dog water because all the red pill does is take what's useful from multiple sources and use what works. A lot of what we do is just feminine dating strategies used for masculine gain. And women really don't like it when you use their dating strategies, apparently.
Brownie, you're spinning around the brownie every time you get dizzy.
Men have been sharing notes for decades and compiling experiences into practical advice that actually works. But society doesn't care about the plight of men. They would rather control language. You hear it all the time.
It's not what you said, it's how you said it.
It always boils down to control. The leading trait written in David D. Edgington's book, The Abusive Wife. Chapter 11 breaks down these traits as: number 1, control. That goes without saying. No description there. Pretty self-explanatory. We all know what that looks like. Number 2, intimidation. You see this when she withdraws or gets distant, avoidant. Dalrock's threat point is a great read on this. I'll link that below. The TLDR is that after the Bolshevik Revolution, in an attempt to get rid of the nuclear family, the Bolsheviks knew they needed people reliant on the state. Because of that, in modern times, women are incentivized by the court system to leave their marriage. They get all the cash and prizes if they do. So essentially, women use this threat point as dread against men to keep them on the plantation.
I'm tired, boss.
Number 3, dictatorial. She's demanding and will refuse accountability. She will refuse to let her husband lead and always has excuses for why she won't let him lead. Number 4, seared conscience. Basically, it's solipsism. She lacks empathy. She will talk to you in ways that you could never imagine talking to her. She has no guilt or feels no shame and feels completely justified for her cruel and reviling speech. I love how he waxes poetically with this language.
Reviling.
She'll never ask for forgiveness, or she'll never apologize or ask for forgiveness. Number 5, she uses intimacy as a weapon. One of the worst ways you see this show up sometimes is she'll do something really cruel and then slink into your bedroom and seduce you instead of actually apologizing like an adult. That's the worst. Number 6, bitterness. Once again, we all know what that looks like. Karen! Number 7, she's hypersensitive. She can sure dish it out, but she can't take it. Number 8, a lack of submission. She'll swear up and down that she's completely submissive, but she won't submit in the ways that actually matter. Number 9, hypocrisy. Demanding behaviors from her husband that she would not meet herself. Number 10, she's a meddler, always interjecting herself into other people's business and plans. Number 11, she lacks friends, because apparently other people don't like to be around her either. Now in this book, he does a really good job of identifying the problems, but there's not a whole lot of solutions. I'll go into some of the scenarios in this book and give some practical advice next week. And let me know in the comments if you've noticed any of these traits and those around you. How many out of the 11 does your girl have? And a lot of the problem is that most of these behaviors are self-sabotaging. Like, this woman will not be happy in any relationship.
Dread.
The biggest aversion to the red pill generally comes when men start talking about implementing dread. Dread works really well in long-term relationships to spark up genuine desire. All long-term relationships will inevitably grow cold. Women and men alike will... When a man suggests that a behavior can be modified by dread.
You think that's manipulation?
Toxic masculinity.
As if the way that women show up in relationships is somehow above all that. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's toxic people. We just listed 11 of those traits. Dread is boundary enforcement, not manipulation. Manipulation, to control or play upon by artful, unfair, or insidious means, especially to one's own advantage. I'm pretty sure a loving, respectful, submissive wife who enjoys sleeping with her husband will only benefit both parties in the relationship. Currently, as it stands with a nagging, disrespectful, self-centered, controlling woman, that relationship will not last very long. So modifying that behavior is really not insidious, it's benevolent. I actually remember a time when I was in high school, I used to razz this kid who was extremely overweight. After summer break, I couldn't even recognize him when he came back to school. He told me flat out, when you razzed me last year, it fueled me to change. And he thanked me for it. We were friends for years after that. So you see, dudes will use congruence tests against one another to suss out your social calibration. A man who is socially calibrated won't lose his chiz when somebody dunks on him. He'll take a beat, reflect on what was said, and think if there was some truth to it. And then agree and amplify. Oh man, you're right, I have put on a lot of weight. Truffle shuffle!
First you gotta do the truffle shuffle. Come on! Do it! Come on! Do it! Cut it out, Mo.
If he spurgs out or shuts down or loses his chiz, that's not the type of dude you want in a foxhole. Dudes do this all the time to actually help each other out, keep each other accountable. You don't want a bunch of frenemies running around just gassing you up, no matter what you're doing. Dread is boundary enforcement, it's not manipulation. Boundaries give her the freedom to decide what she wants, and if that's you, then it's really nice to know that. The problem is that a lot of women have a dual mating strategy. So they'll string dudes along and consume their resources and their attention. Boundaries help you so that you can take necessary steps to find someone who does actually want you. I mean, who's the real victim in that scenario? The worst part is they act like dread is only found in red pill cringe subreddits or some Machiavellian narcissistic handbook somewhere. General Iroh from Avatar really had this correct.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
We take what's useful and toss out what's not. Esther Perel writes,
Jealousy, the spark of Eros.
in chapter 6 of The State of Affairs, and leads with this quote from Alain de Botton's book, How Proust Can Change Your Life. Question: are there any secrets to a long-lasting relationship? Answer: infidelity. Not the act itself, but the threat of it. For Proust, the injection of jealousy is the only thing capable of resurrecting a relationship ruined by habit. Just look into how other therapists gush about Esther Perel, men and women alike. Now, when she writes about this dynamic, it's considered revolutionary, edgy, informative, incredible. But when a man suggests that he should try to find ways to bring polarity back into a marriage so that he can feel something besides duty, it's toxic, apparently. She writes that people are remarkably silent on the subject of this perennial malady of love. Instead, they want to talk about betrayal, violated trust, and lying. Jealousy is ignored in order to protect the victim's moral superiority. It's always been incredible to me how women can completely self-sabotage themselves and then somehow magically become the victim.
Oh, my car stopped working. The devil's always after me.
Becky, you haven't changed the oil since you had that car. That's gonna happen. And I love in this book how they write about the third. When we put all of our hopes into one person, our dependence soars. Every couple lives in the shadow of the third, whether they'd like to admit it or not. And in some sense, it is the lurking presence of potential others that consolidates their bond. Sounds an awful lot like She's Not Yours, It's Just Your Turn. In his book Monogamy, Alan Phillips writes, 2 is company, but 3 is a couple. A lot of Christians will understand this without knowing it. God writes multiple times, I am a jealous God, because you can't really have love without jealousy. A lot of women don't really understand how important it is to be your man's mistress, not just his wife. Sexologist Jack Morin, in his book The Erotic Mind, identifies the 4 cornerstones of eroticism. Longing. The desire for what's not present is number 1. Violating prohibitions. Searching for power and overcoming ambivalence. Ambivalence is basically like loving and hating at the same time. Hate her just a little bit.
Crying. You know what your problem is, huh? You're so goddamn bored you gotta invent things to bitch about. You haven't got a single thing on this earth to do except for your hair. Yeah, your closet was fine. You just needed something to take up your useless, empty, nail polishing, toe polishing, rich bitch sun tanning days.
It seems there's a major disconnect in our culture of what generates actual true desire. The too long didn't read is that people care more about moral platitudes than actually getting results that will benefit both parties. Don't make your religion my burden. And until next time...